My next interview was with Kurt Springer, an Austrian who, at the age of 16, Hitler took over Austria, and he was forced into Hitler's youth. He immigrated to the United States at 40 years old and is now a retired banker. What's your name?
My name is Kurt Springer. I come from Austria.
And what was it you experienced during the World War II?
During World War II, of course, when World War II started, I was a boy like you are. I was a teenager. I was about 14 years old when World War II started. So I grew up partially in the Hitler Youth at that time. I lived in Austria. At that time, Austria was incorporated in the German Reich. So Austria was part of Germany at that time for this number of years, until the war was over. And I attended Hitler Youth like we attend here a scouting movement here. At the Hitler Youth, and we had camps there, and pre-military training there was fun for us. We did some small caliber shooting on targets, was fun too. We had some little war games in the mountains, was fun for us too. But it was, I would say, like the scouting movement was nowadays. And then, of course, when World War II went on, I was drafted in the German army in 1944. At that time, I was just turned 18 years old. My 18th birthday, I served in a boot camp in Yugoslavia. At that time, the German troops occupied Yugoslavia. And we had a boot camp there. And we Austrian young fellows, we went in this boot camp and learned how to be a soldier. This was the first experience I had in the German army. But I was in the German army just for 1 year, from my 18th birthday to my 19th birthday. It was interesting. On my 19th birthday, I celebrated in an American POW camp, this means prisoner of war camp in Germany. And as my birthday present, I could receive 2 cups of soup instead of 1 cup of soup. This was my birthday present in the POW camp.
How did you get into the POW camp?
I tell you, I was, as I told you before, I attended boot camp in Yugoslavia. And then there were guerrilla movements there. Maybe some of you heard about Tito. He was the man, the communistic man, worked for the Russians, and they had guerrilla camps there. And we were assigned to fight off the guerrillas. But I didn't get involved in this because before the boot camp was over, I was transferred back to Austria to a special training sessions to be a telephone man for the army. I laid telephone lines and worked on communication between the front line and where the artillery stations were and so forth. So I wasn't involved. Luckily, I wasn't involved in man-to-man battle. Even we were trained on guns and so on, rifles. No, at first we had German rifles, and toward the end of the war, we got Italian rifles. They were terrible. You couldn't shoot. They were not very good rifles, just to protect ourselves mainly. You couldn't even shoot somebody with them because they were not very. You couldn't focus very well with these guns. But anyway, this was in spring 1945. So at that time the war was almost over. At that time in spring of 45, the American troops and the British and French troops came from the west, from the coast, from the Atlantic coast. And the Russians came from the east, from Russia towards Germany. So they squeezed Germany smaller and smaller because the troops we didn't have much heavy weapons left. Our Air Force was pretty much down at that time. We didn't have any ammunition, too much ammunition left because all the war industry was pumped by the Americans and British airplanes, so we just had a very hard time. But we were happy because we know the war is over. At that time I was almost 19 years old. I didn't want to have a war. And when the American troops surrendered us, or surrounded us, we just surrendered to the American troops. This was in the northern part of Bavaria, which is southern part of Germany, northern part of Bavaria, which is part of Germany. And we were happy they didn't shoot at us. Once I was involved in an artillery fire. We had to run over a field in retreating, and the American artillery shot at us, and it was very scary. To me, it was only really scary part I had during this last year in the war, because they shot at us. But luckily I wasn't hit by artillery. And then we surrounded in a little forest in Germany, and they were Red Cross. The convoy came through the forested area, and we were a big group of German soldiers. We just threw our weapons away and raised our hands, surrendered to Americans. But this was just a Red Cross convoy, and they were very, very afraid of us. They had their weapons ready, they were much more than they were. But we convinced them we don't want to do it anyhow. We were happy the war is over. So they put us on a big truck.
Hold on a second.
How did you feel about the war growing up?
And when I was a teenager about the war, because the youth were pretty much indoctrinated by the Hitler Party. And so we said, oh, it's a good thing to have a war. We will win it anyway. We were convinced that we will win the war, even as young teenagers. But I have one incident when I was during the Hitler Youth. We marched to the city of Salzburg, Austria, just on a training. We marched to the city and sang some war songs there. In the Hitler Youth, I was only 15 years old then, or 16. But we sang a song that was against the Jewish people. I remember this so well. I didn't like that, because I know some Jewish people, they are very nice people. But they came to Austria, the Nazi party, they tried to indoctrinate the youth that the youth are bad. We didn't know anything about concentration camps at that time, and we were teenagers, like a new age. We didn't know too much about concentration camps. We heard there were some camps there, but in our age we didn't think too much about it. But I was very hurt, because when they sing a song against the Jewish, I just didn't sing it. I just moved my lip. I didn't sing it. I didn't agree with that. Why to be against the Jews so much? I had a Jewish doctor when I was young. He was a very nice man. I had a Jewish friend in school. They were a very nice family. They were rich people, but they were very nice. I didn't have anything against the Jews. So I didn't sing the song against the Jews. It was part of my resistance in the Hitler Youth. So I didn't participate on that.
How did the song go?
I can't remember the words, but parts of the words say we have to burn the Jewish homes or something like that, or the Jewish synagogues we have to burn. This was part of the song. I didn't want to sing that. I was against that. At that time, my dad was an officer in the Austrian army. And when the Germans came in 1938, I was 12 years old then. He was taken over in the German army automatically. He had to put an oath upon Hitler. He was the highest authority in the German Reich. But he was a major in the Austrian army. They were just taken over. I remember so well when the last chancellor in Austria, when he had a talk over the radio before he gave up the government to the Germans. And my father, we all cried. I had a brother. He said, I will kill Hitler. He said, I will kill Hitler. He was 2 years older than I was at that time. It wasn't 38 when they took over in Austria. But then, of course, he was a member of the Hitler Youth then too. He joined the German army then. He was convinced that they did a good thing when they occupied Russia. He was he was missed in action in Russia. We never heard from him. He was a lieutenant in the German army. We never heard about him. Cut it off.
I only knew about the one brother you had that's still living.
still living in Vienna.
In Vienna, yeah.
I had an
did
older
not-
brother. He
I
was
never knew that.
missed in action in
No, I never
Russia.
knew that. Oh, that's sad.
We got from the Red Cross later on the confirmation that he died in a Russian POW camp. He was a lieutenant in the German army.
Hmm.
So he had a sickness there. I don't know what it was. Pneumonia. I think he died of pneumonia in the camp there.
So, ask your...
I'll make sure the answers now.
How did other people in the training group feel about what Hitler was doing? Did they agree or disagree?
In a train, you mean in a training group?
Yeah,
Or you mean in school? Students in school?
in school.
In school. We didn't have a training group. You mean the Hitler Youth, maybe that's what you meant. Yeah. No, in the Hitler Youth they didn't say too much because our leaders in the Hitler Youth, they were high up. We couldn't say anything against it. In fact, everybody had to be a member of the Hitler Youth. If it didn't want to participate, they didn't put in a prison camp, but they must have made some problems to us. So all the youth there joined the Hitler Youth. They had some uniform with the swastika on, yeah. Like here the Cub Scout and Scouts, yeah. We had Janken by here the Cub Scouts, no, but we had only swastika. An armband with swastika on. We had to learn how to march and sing songs like this, yeah. But they didn't say too much. I had one friend in this group. He was very Catholic. We were Catholic too at that time. He was very Catholic and he was against it, but he participated. He was afraid they would do something to him. So he participated in the Hitler Youth. I mean, the country where we were, as we said before, they were fun too. They had fun time too, yeah. But not all the young people agreed. Why did they have to be in Hitler Youth? They didn't want anything to have to do with Hitler. But they had to participate in this youth movements there. And they did. They did because they were afraid. I myself was not so afraid of it, but I said Hitler did a good job for us because like in Austria there were many, many people without any work. There were many, many people. Because Hitler, that when we built the Reichsautobahns, was a big freeway for the whole German. And thousands of people had jobs there. And they were happy that gave them jobs to work so they could provide for their families. That was the other side of the coin, I would say. Yeah? But these people didn't think he just wanted to build up the war machinery. Yeah? More like. So he had nice roads to transport the troops. And he built railroad tracks, railroad lines all over the country. They liked it. But there were many people he didn't like because they didn't like the Nazi party. And my dad, even he was a German officer, he didn't like the Nazi party. He didn't want a member of the Nazi party. He was not forced to it. Yeah. But some of the people who joined the SS troop, this was a special force in Hitler's army, special party force. And they were really all for Hitler, yeah. And some of these people, many of these people did Astrology. I don't know what did the same thing too, but I was just a young fellow. I was happy that he wasn't involved in a battle, yeah. To stay out as good as I can. One thing I had asthma at the time, very severe asthma. But and I said they will draft me, but they drafted me anyway, Italy. Even I had asthma, they drafted me.
They needed soldiers
Yes,
badly.
assured them people need soldiers badly, yeah. Little, they call it Ahnenpass. This is a pedigree chart. And my dad had to fill out, he had to prove to the army that he was not
Just hold it up and I'll zoom in on it.
So you had to prove
He
you
had
weren't
to prove
Jewish?
to the army that he's not Jewish, he's not Jewish ancestry. But they had to go to 3 generations back and prove they were not Jewish. Otherwise he couldn't have been a member of the army. He wasn't even an officer in the army.
And so this is sort of your genealogy to prove that you weren't Jewish.
For my own genealogy I work on. I didn't get enough information, but the direct line I have, and I have my grandparents on, my great-grandparents on. I don't have the children on, but this was one good they did for me. Yeah. They didn't know about that. They just wanted to prove any work in the German army.
So it was sort of a forced genealogy that you got done.
You had to be an Aryan. It's not just Aryan nation, what we call nowadays. We had been Aryan, he had to be a non-Jewish person. So it's helped me.
That's interesting.
And so they made you prove that you had no Jewish blood.
He had to get all the documents together. He wasn't.
Yeah, he probably
He was about
had to
50
have their
years
birth
old
certificates and
at that
everything.
time. Had to get everything together. Because my line come from Czechoslovakia, he had to get all the documents there and prove it. Then he got an Ahnen pass. This is ancestral pass, I would translate it. Ancestral pass. And he had proved he was Aryan. This helped us later on to think. I want to show you one thing that's interesting here. My dad was in the German army then. He was in the German Luftwaffe, an officer.
Hold up the water.
But he was wounded in World War I. He was not in battles. He was an administrative officer. And this was part of the uniform. This is a little dagger, which was never used. It's very strong, but they used it on as part of their uniform. They had it next to their coats. This is very nice heirloom for us. Here we have the swastika on it. Maybe you have to see this swastika on here, on the shaft here.
Oh yeah.
Because my dad became a colonel in the German Luftwaffe. He's an administrative officer on there because he couldn't use his right arm. His right arm was stiff from World War I. When he was in the battle with the Italian forces, World War I, Austria and Italy were enemies. This is good to have. That time, as you know, they made some raids with the Air Force in the last year of the war in Germany and Austria. And in Salzburg, where I lived, where my parents lived, we had some air attacks, very light ones, but we lost some people there. At that time, I was in the army, stationed in Salzburg, Austria, and they bombed 2 or 3 times Salzburg, but very small, I would say small areas, not like the German city, they're completely devastated. But we lost some lives there. We had fire there, we were trained, we had to go in the bunkers, we had the two mountains in the city. They drilled some bunkers in so we could to be safe from the air raids. And we went in there. And then I remember in our house where we lived was next to the river there. And the first attack they had, I think these were American bombers. They blew out the windows from our house. The house itself was not hurt, but the windows were blown out. We had to replace all the windows. Then we had to have just paper. We didn't get any glass anymore. In the World War II, we had to use this paper, this treated paper. This was the experience I had in little air raids in Salzburg, Austria. But luckily they didn't bomb too many cities in Austria. They bombed some cities in Vienna. I remember in Vienna, which is the capital of Austria, the Russians come from the east through Hungary, and they bombed the very old cathedral in Vienna. It's a 300-year-old cathedral. It's a masterpiece there. They bombed it. But even the Americans helped us after World War II to restore this cathedral there. This beautiful old building. It was in Vienna. We had a little good time. We had sometimes. We had not very much to eat last year in the war. Even before in 1942, for instance, in 43, when I was still only 15, 16 years old, we had a farmer close to our city, a friend. And sometimes we went out there with the train to this little farming community and he gave us food for money. Or my parents traded cigarettes for food and things like this. So we had enough to eat still, but it was very hard. We had stamps here, like food stamps here. They had it here too, I remember, in the United States for a while. It was we get enough milk and enough meat and enough butter and so forth. But through this farmer, I would say we smuggled some of these things to our city where we lived. Because the police was there. The police had checked the trains. And when they found people who hoarded some food, they just took it away from them. Sometimes they get fined and things like this. So my good mother did this. My mother, my dad was engaged in his calling in the German army. But my mother was very brave, and some of the little boys we drove with, they were all scared to death that the police, the German police, would take our stuff away. But we went there, I went 4 or 5 times. This was about 20 miles out of Salzburg. But we were always lucky that they never got us. So we get our provisions.
I think they went down the side.
No, I didn't get the medal myself. I was on
Did they go down on your couch?
I was on the floor 1 year. The brother who was missed in action in Russia, he got this medal. This was for infantry, for stormtroopers. Stormtroopers in the infantry, they got this medal here. You probably heard they had a very interesting medal called the Iron Cross. This was for big bravery. Like here, the Purple Heart, I would compare it. My brother didn't get the Iron Cross, but my father had one from World War I. I don't have it anymore. This was a medal to get my brother also. He got as an infantry, as a stormtrooper, he got this medal too. Well, my dad, he got the medal for faithful service in the Luftwaffe. This was not in the battles, it was a medal they received for their service to the country, I would say.
Yeah.
This was, there's a cross in the middle, you see the swastika. And all this, there's a swastika. They had a German eagle here on the top, and this one here, the German rifle, and the swastika.
Let's see that second one.
They had a German rifle here. On the top, the eagle, the German eagle.
What did the eagle
And the
stand
cross.
for?
They don't like we honor sometimes here, the American eagle. They honor the eagle that this is a very brave bird flying high. They had these emblems there too. They used this too at that time.
At what point did you start to realize that the war was bad? And
Oh, when I was drafted, I was 18 years old, as I told you, in May 1944. And we all knew that the war comes to an end. At that time, this was the last war. The war started in 1939, when Germany occupied Poland. Then in 1942, then in 1940, I think it was, Great Britain and France fought against us. In 1941, now in 42, then American declared war to Germany. And when this happened, I said, there's no way we can win this war. It doesn't make any sense. But the Hitler had so much power in his troops and his S-forces, everybody had to fight. And even they would know the war comes to an end. But Germany wanted to occupy Poland and Russia. We lost 10,000 of soldiers in Russia. Maybe you remember the word Stalingrad. It was in winter. And we lost 10,000 of people. The Russians lost the same amount of people. They lost even more people. But this was the turning point in the war. When the German troops went back from Stalingrad, it was not far away, a few hundred miles away from Moscow. When they had to go back towards Germany because they couldn't hold these big front lines there. The front line was so big, we didn't have enough people to secure the front lines. It was just too big for us. The Germans made so many point forwards, but they couldn't get anything to back up them. They had to go back. They had enough ammunition and food, and they had to go back again.
So they weren't supplied very well.
That's correct. I want to compare this to Napoleon. When Napoleon in the early 1800s, he occupied Russia too. Napoleon was the French emperor. And he had to go back. Russia's just too big. Russia is 10 times as big as Germany.
Whenever you went on marches, were you ever like, were people afraid of you, or were they like yell things out?
No, when we were marching in our own country, you mean? No, they were not afraid because we heard off in the night we had some camps, like in Salzburg where I lived. We had some camps there where they trained the soldiers. And then all in the night we heard them marching towards the train station. And you know, some more troops had to go on the front. This was sad for us. This is over. It's over.
What was it like in Austria?
All the
when,
Germans are afraid of the American people. And vice versa too.
what was it like in where you lived when the war was over? Was there?
Yeah, when the war was over, of course, when my troops surrendered, we were gathered and we were transported in a U.S. POW camp, in a POW camp. This was in Germany. There were 50,000 troops there in a camp. I remember I spent my 19th birthday in a POW camp, as I told you before. We were surrounded, we had we were happy we were in the American zone. If you would have ended up in the Russian zone, they would have transported to Siberia to work for them. But we were happy we were in the American zone. They were more lenient. Even I remember when I went to the camp, I had my watch still on. And one of the GIs took my watch away. And he had 5, 6 watches on his underarm, which he took away from the German soldiers. Now you can have my watch, I don't care. But they stole things too. But they're still more lenient than the Russian people. I think that we were happy we were in the American zone. I was released, as an Austrian, we were released first, before the Germans were released. So they said, and I know they lied to us too. They was in big trucks on the Autobahn. And they said they would bring it to the German border, because it was not to they drove us from a mile on the German border, then unloaded us, you go on your own. Because how to get home? We had our release papers by then. We went home as good as we could. Some trains were running, because many of the train tracks were bound. They were running for half an hour, then we had to walk again. Or hitchhike on trucks. That's how we got back to Austria.
Mm-hmm.
I got back to Salzburg. This time my parents were in Vienna. And they were, this before they had 4 zones in Vienna, like in Berlin, they had 4 zones. They had the Russian, British, the French, American zone in Vienna, in the capital of Austria. Well, my parents lived in the American zone, they were happy too. But before the Americans came, the Russians were occupied our house where we lived on the outskirts of Vienna. Well, I remember they beat up my dad because they found his German uniform, they beat him up. But they know he was wounded, so they didn't do anything to him, but they beat him up within our house. My parents told me this, but I wasn't there at the time. They had a hard time, but they were happy when the Americans came in there. We had the American soldiers, 2 soldiers thing in our house. We were happy to be in our house. They bought cigarettes to my dad, he was a smoker. He was happy for that, they bought them some food, they were very nice. I had to say what nice of a Russian do we had first. When my mother and dad had a Russian officer living in our house. He was very nice. He called my mother Mamushka, that means old mother, Mamushka. He brought us some things too. But other than that, they were different people, how they were. Some people were nice and very cruel, you know. And some cruel beat up my dad. Yeah. But they lived through it, and they got through it. When Hitler was in power, I can talk about Austria, because in 1938 Hitler took command in Austria. And there were many Nazis in Austria too. There were members in the background. They were happy that Hitler took over Austria. But the growth of the people in Austria, they were not happy because they want to have a free country as we are now. So we were required. Many Austrians ended up in concentration camps too. In fact, I remember the first chancellor in Austria, he became chancellor after in 1946 or 1946, when Austria became a free country again. The first chancellor, his name was Fiegel. He was in a concentration camp in Bavaria, so they didn't kill him. He was more a political prisoner, they didn't kill him. But in other camps they killed many people. They killed, as you know, they killed Jewish people, and they killed Polish people, not just Jews, they killed other people too. It's become like we heard about maybe Auschwitz, big camps. It was located in Poland. They killed many Polish people, they do, not just Jewish people.
Were you ever at a concentration camp?
I never saw one, not even after the war I saw one. I know there was a concentration camp in Austria too, but this was maybe 100 miles away where I lived. And they didn't tell anything about these camps. We get it in the back minds, people told, very quiet. But we didn't know, what's going on. We didn't know that gas to people and things like that. We know that they were in prison, they were not too nice. We probably heard that they beat them up with things like this. But they're in concentration camps, in some of those camps where they burned those people. We didn't know. Those people who knew about it, they didn't tell anything.
Yeah,
Used to be afraid of laying up in a camp too when they tell something.
we went to Dachau in the 70s.
Yeah, this is in Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah, the husband was in